Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagvatam, Kantaraj Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavani Ki Jai. So we're continuing in the study of the history of Ajamila in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagvatam. And I received homework from Sanmukh and from Advitya and from Agastya. And I don't think I got it from anyone else. Let me just double check. No. Okay. So, we'll start with Sanmukh. Sanmukh Prabhu said, research about Vipralambha and explain with examples what this means. For reference, look it up in the index of Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, story of Narada Muni, and the story of Parikshit Maharaj. Okay. Sanmukh writes, Vipralambha is when a person feels separation from Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, during his last 12 years of existence at Jagannath Puri, shows that by having a feeling of separation from Krishna, one will be able to develop dormant love for him. This statement is also explained by Madhavendra Puri in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya-lila 8.35. E sloke Krishna prema kare upadesha, Krishnera virahe bhaktira bhava visesha. In this verse, Madhavendra Puri teaches how to achieve ecstatic love for Krishna. By feeling separation from Krishna, one becomes spiritually situated. This situation is also explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya-lila 20.3, chapter 20, verse 3. E mata Mahaprabhu vaise nilachale, Rajani divase Krishna virahe vivale. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu thus resided at Jagannath Puri, Nilachala, he was continuously overwhelmed night and day by separation from Krishna. And Sanmukh writes, just by feeling, he misspelled the word feeling, it's F-E-E-L-I-N-G, not F-E-L-L-I-N-G. Just by feeling separation from Krishna, even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was feeling agitated and full of anxiety, as explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita until 1958. Virahe vyakula Prabhu udvege utila gambirara bitye mukha gasite lagila. Feeling separation from Krishna, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so distraught that in great anxiety he stood up and began rubbing his face against the walls of the Gambira. And then Sanmukh writes, only by developing love for Krishna can one be eligible to serve Krishna eternally. In the 7th verse of the Siksastakam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu shows how difficult the time would be without the association of the Lord. Yugayitam nimesena chakshasasavra pavasayitam sunyayitam jagat sarvam govinda virhename. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. Also, in the Siksastakam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks about the symptoms of love. Dayanam galadasru dharaya, vadanam gadgadurudaya jira, pulaka nisitam vapu kada tavanamagrahane bhavishyati. O my Lord, When will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? In Chaitanya Charitamrita Antya 834, another statement regarding separation is given. Ai Dina Dayardra Nata He Mathura Nata Kada Valokyase Hridayam Tvad Aloka Kataram Daita Brahmyati Kim Karom Yaham. O my Lord, O most merciful Master, O Master of Mathura, when shall I see you again? Because of my not seeing you, my agitated heart has become unsteady. O most beloved one, what shall I do now? Okay, so very good, Sanmukh. Research about Vipralambha Bhava and explain with examples. You did it very well. Thank you very, very much. So, and Sanmukh writes, Vipralambha Bhava is when a person feels separation from Krishna. Good. Okay, so we received homework also from Avidya. So he writes, explain the last paragraph of the purport of Srimad Bhagvatam 6.2.23. To increase his eagerness to glorify the Lord, they disappeared so that he would feel separation in their absence. In the mode of separation, glorification of the Lord is very intense. This is called Vipralambha Bhava. One second, I have to take this phone call. Hi, Malai. Just 1 second, I have to call. Now we'll read Advitya's homework. So it was the Vishnu Dutas who disappeared so that Ajamila would feel separation in their absence. In the mode of separation, glorification of the Lord is very intense. This is called Vipralambha Bhava. So Advitya writes, when you like someone very much and they are away from you, then you like them more. For example, when your mom goes away for some time, you feel more attached to her. Just like that, in the case of Ajamila, the Vishnu Dutas went away so that Ajamila would feel more attached to Krishna. This will happen because in the mode of separation, the glorification of Krishna is intense. This is called Vipralamba Bhava. Okay, very good, Advitya. Yes, when you love someone and they go away for some reason or other, you feel their absence very acutely. And then we received homework from Agastya. Agastya writes, explain the last paragraph of the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam 6.2.23. To increase his eagerness to glorify the Lord, they, meaning the Vishnu Dutas, disappeared so that he would feel separation in their absence. In the mode of separation, glorification of the Lord is very intense. This is called Vipralamba Bhava. And then Agastya writes, in this verse, it explains how the Vishnu Dutas leave as soon as Ajamila attempted to say something. Earlier in the purport, it says, Papista ye durachara deva brahmana nindatka apatya bojanas te sam akale maranam dhruvam, which means, for people that are very sinful, unclean in their habits, who defy the existence of God, who disrespect Vaishnavas and Brahmanas, and who eat anything, untimely death is guaranteed. In Kali Yuga, a person with a maximum lifespan of 100 years, but as you become more degraded, the duration of your life decreases. Ajamila, who was freed from all sinful reactions by chanting the holy name of the Lord sincerely, had his lifetime extended. In the Bhagavatam, it describes how Ajamila was in awe after looking at the Vishnu Dutas. In the last paragraph, it says, to increase his eagerness to glorify the Lord, they disappeared so that he would feel separation in their absence. In the mode of separation, glorification of the Lord is very intense. This shows that the Vishnu Dutas knew that Ajamila was amazed by their presence, and by leaving him, he would feel separation from them. He goes on to explain why they did it, which is because glorification of the Lord is very intense in the mode of separation. Very good, Agastya. And then second question, research about Vipralamba Bhava and explain with examples what this means. Vipralamba Bhava means thinking of Krishna in separation. And according to Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 22.63, it has four divisions: Purva Raga, Mana Pravasa, and Prema Vaichitya. Purva Raga is when someone gets attached to someone before meeting them, through seeing, hearing, and so on. According to Ujjwala Nilamani, the word mana is used to describe the mood of the lover, or the mood of the lover, or in this case, the devotee who is separated from Krishna. Pravasa is a word used to indicate the separation of people who were previously closely associated. Lastly, prema, vaichitya, means someone is afraid of separation, even though the person they are attached to is present. An example of Vipralamba Bhava is when Krishna left for Mathura, and the gopis were mad. That doesn't mean they were upset at Krishna, but were mad due to separation from Krishna. Mad meaning the sense of like losing their mind. Due to separation from Krishna, in the 47th chapter of the Krishna book, when Uddhava visits Vrindavana to deliver Krishna's message to the gopis, you can see how the gopis have Vipralamba Bhava. Okay, Thank you very much, Augusta. Very well done. Well written. So thank you, Sanmukh, Advitya, and Augusta. Hare Krishna. Okay, so today we'll go a little further. We stopped, I guess, on 6-2-23. So I want to do a little bit of a review to where we are now. So we started the history of the life of Ajamila, and it says in the introduction, summary to it. These introduction summaries, I think, are written by, I'm not sure, but I think by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And it says, throughout Srimad Bhagvatam, there are descriptions of 10 subject matters, including creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems. Sukadeva Goswami, the speaker of Srimad Bhagvatam, has already described creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th cantos. Now, in the 6th canto, which consists of 19 chapters, he will describe Poshana, or protection by the Lord. The first chapter relates to the history of Ajamila. I mean the first chapter of the 6th canto. Relates to the history of Ajamila, who was considered a greatly sinful man, but was liberated when four order carriers of Vishnu, meaning the Vishnu Dutas, came to rescue him from the hands of the order carriers of Yamaraj. A full description of how he was liberated, having been relieved of the reactions of his sinful life, is given in this chapter. When it says he was liberated, what does it mean? He was liberated from dying and given a second chance to purify himself. This is a very rare occasion. It doesn't usually happen. But it happened because he said the name of Krishna at the moment of death without any material desire in his mind. A full description of how he was liberated, having been relieved of the reactions of his sinful life, is given in this chapter. Given in this chapter, sinful activities are painful both in this life and in the next. We should know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. Okay. So, we should all know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. That is called a law of nature. So I want you to write that down. We should know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. This is in the chapter 1, History of the Life of Ajamila. So that's Canto 6, chapter 1. And that's the summary of this chapter 1. It says, we should know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. On the path of fruitive work, one certainly commits sinful activities. Fruitive work, write that word down, fruitive, F-R-U-I-T-I-V-E. And your homework is to write down the definition of fruitive work. Now this is, as I've explained before, it's not in a dictionary, English dictionary. It's not actually an English word, although it's derived from the word fruit. Prabhupada coined this word because he did not have a proper word in English to translate this Sanskrit word. And so he coined this English word. And fruitive means basically desiring selfishly the fruit of your work. In other words, the result of your work. It could be money, it could be prestige, it could be a lot of things, but you don't want to offer it to Krishna, you want to enjoy it yourself. That's why it's called fruitive work. On the path of fruitive work, in other words, selfish activities not meant to please Krishna, but please oneself, one certainly commits sinful activities. And therefore, according to the considerations of karma kanda, different types of atonement are recommended. Okay, so write down karma kanda and write down what is the definition of karma kanda. This is your homework. First, the definition of fruitive work, and now the definition of karma kanda. Actually, you can find the definition of karma kanda in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse number 40. One second. Verse number 40. 42 and 43. Okay, so and there you'll see the word fruitive also used in the definition of karma kanda. And it says, this is Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, text 42 and 43. People in general are not very intelligent, and due to their ignorance, they are most attached to fruitive activities recommended in the karma kanda portion of the Vedas. They do not want anything more than sense gratificatory proposals for enjoying life in heaven, where wine and women are available and material opulence is very common. Okay, so there you see these words are used, and it continues to define karma kanda. Okay, so now going back to this introduction to chapter 1, such methods of atonement. Okay, look up the word of atonement, another important word in this introduction. A-T-O-N-E-M-E-N-T. Such methods of atonement, however, do not free one from ignorance, which is the root of sinful life. So, another thing I want to write down is ignorance is the root of sinful life. Ignorance is the root of sinful life. Consequently, one is prone to commit sinful activities even after atonement. It's a very important point. Write down the word prone, P-R-O-N-E. Prone, P-R-O-N-E. So far you've written down prone, atonement, and fruitive. And also karma kanda. You have to write the definition of these 4 words. Consequently, one is prone to commit sinful activities even after atonement, which is therefore very inadequate for purification. In other words, even though you can purify the sinful reactions to specific actions that you committed, but you're not necessarily purified of the desire to commit sins. So therefore, because of that, it says, consequently, one is prone to commit sinful activities even after atonement. So prone means you have a tendency to commit more sinful activities even after you have atoned for sins that you committed. Atone means you pay the price to get rid of the influence of these sinful activities. It doesn't it doesn't purify the desire to sin. That's the point. Consequently, one is prone, or one has a tendency to commit sinful activities even after atonement, after you've already atoned or performed penances, which means you accept certain punishments or sacrifices for those sins that you committed, which is therefore very inadequate for purification, but it doesn't give you complete purification of the desire to sin. On the path of speculative knowledge, one becomes free from sinful life by understanding things as they are. Therefore, the acquirement of speculative knowledge is also considered a method of atonement. So, it says, on the path of speculative knowledge, one becomes free from sinful life by understanding things as they are. Therefore, the acquirement of speculative knowledge is also considered a method of atonement. Okay, now, this brings up a question. We always characterize in our lectures speculative knowledge as something that's bad. But in these two sentences, it seems as if speculative knowledge is also positive. So, what is the truth here? Well, there is a bona fide way of speculating and an unbona fide way of speculating. So, the unbona fide way of speculating is depending completely on your own senses and mind and intelligence. And the bona fide way of speculating is you ask a question and you see what the acharyas have written about that question. And you repeat the acharya's reasoning, and you adapt it to the point in question. So that's a type of speculation. Speculation in this sense means you have a doubt about something and you want to research and find what it is. In other words, to understand what is real knowledge as opposed to false knowledge, real knowledge will explain things as they are, or may help you understand things as they are. Like, for example, when you understand things as they are, you become free of sinful life. So, what is the body as it is actually? It's a temporary covering of the soul. But the real principle of life is the soul, not the body. So people who accept the body, they are misled. They don't understand their life as it is. Their life is due, in this body, is due to the presence of the soul, not because of the body itself. The body itself is dead matter. It only appears alive because of the presence of the supersoul and soul, the two, the supersoul and the individual soul. So, therefore, the acquirement of speculative knowledge is also considered a method of atonement. But this is speculative knowledge following the acharyas. So you have a question and you research it in the Shastra, and you repeat the opinion or the factual opinion of the acharyas. So that is that means you are atoning. You're paying a price. What is the price? You took the effort to research the statements of Krishna and the acharyas to clear away your doubt. While performing fruitive activities, one can become free from the actions of sinful life through austerity, penance, celibacy, control of the mind and senses, truthfulness, and the practice of mystic yoga. So, while performing fruitive activities, one can become free from the actions of sinful life through austerity, penance, celibacy, control of the mind and senses, truthfulness, and practice of mystic yoga. By awakening knowledge, one may also neutralize sinful reactions, and neither of these methods, however, can free one from tendency to commit sinful activities. Okay, so this is a very important introduction to this history of life of Ajamila. That is the main point here is being made, is simply atoning for sinful actions committed in the past, and atoning for them to purify the reactions, the negative reactions for these sinful activities, is not enough to purify the desire to sin. It simply nullifies some of the sinful reactions, but the desire to sin can remain. But if you not only neutralize some of the reactions by accepting atonement, but you understand things as they actually are, or as they are, then you can purify the desire to sin. So let me give you an example. Let's say you get a mathematical problem to solve, and you solve the problem, but you don't really understand the basic principle of the solution. So the next time you encounter another mathematical problem, you might not be able to solve it because you didn't understand the principle of how you solved the first problem. So what does it mean, understanding the principle? Well, let's say you perform a sacrifice like the Satyanarayana Puja, and it nullifies, in the end of the sacrifice, it nullifies a whole bunch of sinful reactions to sins that you committed earlier. But that does not necessarily nullify the desire to sin, which means that you can commit more sins again without understanding the basic principle. What is the basic principle? Basic principle is that I am not this body. This body belongs to Krishna. The senses belong to Krishna. The mind belongs to Krishna. The intelligence belongs to Krishna. Therefore, if I understand that fundamental principle and understand facts as they are, then I can stop myself from desiring to sin more, knowing well the consequences of it. But if I simply nullify some sinful reactions by performing a ritual activity like Satyanarayana Puja, that does not mean that I understand the cause of the sin. Say, like, for example, let's say there's a fire, and you put the fire out by putting water on it. But even after putting water on the fire, the flames disappear, but the embers may still be there. Embers, E-M-B-E-R-S. What is an ember? An ember is, 1 second, E-M-B-E-R-S. What is an ember? A glowing fragment, as of coal, from a fire especially, one smoldering in ashes. So an ember could be a piece of wood that, although the flame is not there, it's still alive. It's still lighted up. And if you think the fire is out by putting out the flame, you're wrong. As long as there are embers and if there's natural wind, your fire can start again. So in the same way, one may eliminate sinful reactions, but not the tendency to sin by performing these rituals like Satyanarayana Puja. Therefore, one can commit more sins. So Prabhupada says, by awakening knowledge, one may also neutralize sinful reactions. Neither of these methods, however, can free one from the tendency to commit sinful activities. So the tendency to commit sinful activities is very, very strong and very difficult to get rid of. So that's what's being explained here. Now, next paragraph says, by bhakti yoga, one can completely avoid the tendency for sinful life. Other methods are not very feasible. Okay, work up the word feasible, F-E-A-S-I-B-L-E. Feasible means something is possible, right? So when it says not very feasible, it says basically that simply purifying sinful reactions by pious activity and atonement can maybe get rid of those sinful reactions, but not the tendency to sin. So how do you get rid of the tendency to sin? It says by bhakti yoga. That's regulated devotional service in the association of genuine Siksha Diksha gurus or sadhus. Sadhu is a person who has no other interest in life than Krishna. Therefore, the Vedic literature concludes that devotional service is more important than the methods of karma kanda and jnana kanda. Okay, so the kanda, it's a method. So one method is performing good karma, and the other method is developing knowledge. But both of those khandas or paths for achieving the goal are not sufficient for getting rid of the tendency to sin. Then Prabhupada writes, only the path of devotional service is auspicious for everyone. So auspicious means very favorable or very good for their ultimate purpose. Fruitive activities and speculative knowledge cannot independently liberate anyone, but devotional service, independent of karma and jnana, is so potent that one who has fixed up his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna is guaranteed not to meet the Yamadutas, the order carriers of Yamaraj, even in dreams. So there's a real benefit to engage in pure devotional service that you cannot get simply by performing rituals or any other, or meditation or any other technique of yoga. There has to be devotional service overriding everything else. To prove the strength of devotional service, Sukadeva Goswami describes the history of Ajamila. Okay, so now we understand why this history of Ajamila is in the Srimad Bhagvatam. Sukadeva Goswami specifically spoke about the history of Ajamila to prove the strength or to prove the power of devotional service that far supersedes jnana yoga and karma yoga and mystic yoga. Far exceeds their reach. Ajamila was a resident of Kanya-Kubja, the modern Kannauj. Kannauj, if I'm not mistaken, is in, I don't know. I'm not sure where it is. You can look up, where is the Kannauj section of India? He was trained by his parents to become a perfect Brahmana by studying the Vedas and following the regulative principles. But because of his past, this youthful Brahmana was somehow attracted by a prostitute. Prostitute means a woman of ill repute. And because of her association, he became most fallen and abandoned all regulative principles. So there you go. That's what happens when you associate with low-class people. You become low-class also over time. So, the first thing every child should learn is avoid the association of bad people. How do you know someone is bad? You look on their plate when they eat. If there's meat and onions and garlic and liquor and things like that, you know they're a bad person. They cannot be a good person. Although they might have some good qualities, but they're not pure good qualities. We should only eat prasadam, and therefore every amount of prasadam that we eat inflates in the body, and we can do things correctly. Whereas if we don't have an understanding of avoiding bad association, we get entangled and influenced by bad association and eventually give up Krishna consciousness. So, what is good association? What is bad association? Good association is associating with devotees who actually follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness strictly and happily. Not only strictly, but happily. And therefore, they don't engage in sinful activities, either in word or act or in any way. And non-devotees are people who don't give importance to following Krishna's instructions or ignore them completely. And so they are unwittingly, without knowing, engaged in all kinds of sinful activities, and they think they're right. And therefore they take birth over and over again in the cycle of birth and death. So it says here, Ajamila begot in the womb of the prostitute 10 sons, the last of whom was called Narayana. At the time of Ajamila's death, when the order carriers of Yamaraj came to take him, he loudly called the name Narayana in fear because he was attached to his youngest son. Thus he remembered the original Narayana. Lord Vishnu, although he did not chant the holy name of Narayana completely offenselessly, it acted nevertheless. As soon as he chanted the holy name, Narayana, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu immediately appeared on the scene. A discussion ensued between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraja, and by hearing that discussion, Ajamila was liberated, and those of the Yamaraja, immediately appeared on the scene. A discussion ensued between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraja, and by hearing the discussion, Ajamila was liberated. He could then understand the bad effect of fruitive activities and could also understand how exalted the process of devotion, how exalted is the process of devotional service. So these are the two things that we should try and emulate, or try and do in the same way that Ajamila experienced them. One, we should understand the bad effect of fruitive activities, activities meant to satisfy our gross material senses. And secondly, one second, I just got a message here. Okay, so therefore, it says, on hearing that discussion between the Vishnu Dutas and Yamadutas, Ajamila was liberated. He could then understand the bad effects of fruitive activities. So number one, this whole history of Ajamila is to understand the bad effect of fruitive activities, and two, and could understand how exalted is the process of devotional service. So these are the two takeaways of this pastime of Ajamila that we are reading today. So I wanted to go over that so we understand why we're reading this every day, and we'll continue until we come to the end, which will be probably about 4 or 5, maybe 6 more sessions. But if you understand this, the bad effect of fruitive activities, activities that are selfish activities, not meant to please Krishna, but to please our own selfish desires. And secondly, if we can understand how exalted, how wonderful, how rewarding is the process of devotional service, then we have understood this chapter, or this section of the Srimad Bhagvatam. Okay. So then we go to Canto 1, Chapter 1, and we go to Chapter 2. And we're going to read the introduction to Chapter 2 to get a summary of the takeaways or the reasons why we're reading this. So this Chapter 2 is Ajamila delivered by the Vishnu Dutas. In this chapter, the messengers from Vaikuntha explain, meaning the Vishnu Dutas, the messengers from Vaikuntha explain to Yamadutas, the servants of Yamaraj, the glories of chanting the holy name of the Lord. The Vishnu Dutas said, quote, "Now impious acts are being performed even in an assembly of devotees. For a person who is not punishable is going to be punished in the assembly of Yamaraj." So the Vishnu Dutas are implying that Yamaraj and his servants are devotees. They're not demons. But he's saying, because you don't have a full understanding of the glories of chanting Hare Krishna, and Yamaraj said the name of Krishna at the moment of death by calling his son Narayana, you're going to punish someone who is sinless, because by saying the name of Narayana purely, all his sins were eradicated. The Yamadutas didn't understand that. And therefore, they're going to commit a sinful activity even though they're an assembly of devotees. The mass of people are helpless and must depend upon the government for their safety and security. But if the government takes advantage of this to harm the citizens, where will they go? So this is an example to help us understand what's going on with the Yamadutas, the followers of Yamaraj. So it says, the Vishnu Duta said, "Now impious acts are being performed even in an assembly of devotees. For a person who is not punishable is going to be punished in the assembly of Yamaraja. Okay. And then, to give an example, they say, the mass of people are helpless. It must depend upon the government for their safety and security. Yeah, the government has a police department, and the police have guns and different types of protective armor and different things like that. And so they are trained to protect people and cause harm to criminals who attack innocent people who are unarmed and who are not trained to protect themselves. Okay. So the mass of people are helpless and must depend upon the government for their safety and security. But if the government takes advantage of this to harm the citizens, where will they go? We see perfectly that Ajamila should not be punished. So the Vishnu Dutas understand Ajamila should not be punished. Although you, meaning the Yamadutas, you are attempting to take him to Yamaraj for punishment. Okay, so that's the first paragraph of the introduction to chapter 2. And then it continues. It was due to Ajamila's glorifying the holy name of the Supreme Lord that he was not punishable. In other words, by saying the name of Narayana purely one time, all his sins were eradicated. That's the glory and power of the holy name. The Vishnu Dutas explained this as follows, quote, simply by once chanting the holy name of Narayana, this Brahmana has become free from the reactions of sinful life. Indeed, he has been freed not only from the sins of his life, of this life, but from the sins of many thousands of other lives. He has already undergone true atonement for all his sins, true atonement as opposed to incomplete atonement. If one atones according to the directions of the Shastras, one does not actually become free from sinful reactions. Wow, that's a big statement. If one atones according to the directions of the Shastras, one does not actually become free from sinful reactions. But if one chants the holy name of the Lord, even a glimpse of such chanting can immediately free one from all sins. So now we see the major difference between performing rituals for purification and chanting Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna is much more effective, much more thorough, much more beneficial than simply performing rituals that are partially effective and partially, let's say, cleansing of sinful reactions. It's not complete. And therefore, even after performing recommended rituals that are recommended in the Vedas, one can still have a tendency to engage in sinful activities and actually do that. Chanting the glories of the Lord's holy name awakens all good fortune. Therefore, there is no doubt that Ajamila, being completely free from all sinful reactions, should not be punished by Yamaraj. This is the conclusion of the Yamadutas. As they were saying this, the Vishnu Dutas released Ajamila from the ropes of the Yamadutas and left for their own abode. The Brahmana Ajamila, however, offered his respectful obeisances to the Vishnu Dutas. He could understand how fortunate he was to have chanted the holy name of Narayana at the end of his life. Indeed, he could realize the full significance of this good fortune. Having thoroughly understood the discussion between the Yamadutas and the Vishnu Dutas, he became a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He lamented very much for how very sinful he had been, and he condemned himself again and again. Finally, Because of his association with the Vishnu Dutas, Ajamila, his original consciousness aroused, gave up everything and went to Haridwar, where he engaged in devotional service without deviation, always thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus the Vishnu Dutas went there, seated him on a golden throne, and took him away to Vaikuntha. So eventually, Ajamila is liberated because he actually engages in devotional service. And devotional service means always thinking of Krishna and acting for the pleasure of Krishna. In summary, although the sinful Ajamila meant to call his son the holy name of Lord Narayana, even though chanted in the preliminary stage, Namabhasa, was able to give him liberation. Therefore, one who chants the holy name of the Lord with faith and devotion is certainly exalted. He is protected even in his material conditional life. So now we see the absolute glory and power of the holy name, much greater than any ritual performances recommended in the Vedas. And this is why we're reading these two chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2, and then we'll also read chapter 3 about the history of Ajamila. So your homework for tomorrow is 1. Explain what is the purpose, for what purpose Sukadeva Goswami included the history of Ajamila in the Srimad Bhagvatam that he recited. 2, answer the question, did Ajamila die and then came back to life again by Vishnu Dutas or not? And that's the answer to that is in Canto 6, Chapter 1, verse number 33. And 3.3, why are the ritual performances in the Vedas not sufficient to free one completely of sinful desires and sinful acts? They're only partially effective. So that's an interesting question to answer. And the hint for answering that question is to understand the difference between ritual activities for purification and pure devotional service. And for this, you can look up chapters 2 of Bhagavad Gita, verse number 42 and 43, which you've seen before, but carefully read that purport, read that verse and purport. And also read, to answer this question, Canto 6, Chapter 2. Verse, text number 11. So, Canto 6, Chapter 2, verse number 11 and 12 should be able to answer that question. Okay, so you have if I'm not mistaken, 3 homework assignments for tomorrow. And I'm helping you by showing you where you can find those answers. And you can do your own research also. Haribol, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Are there any questions? And you have some definitions of words also. Any questions?
I don't see any.
Okay. Anybody listening?
Yeah, over 10.
Okay.
Yeah, 11.
Haribol, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.